Junie Hart had spent 5 years turning a 2-desk garage office into Meridian Cyber, a security firm now valued past $300 million. And not one of those years had prepared her for a stranger who looked at her like he already knew every secret she kept. At a Chicago gala she was too tired to enjoy, she let herself be reckless for exactly one night, going home with a magnetic, dangerous man who gave her nothing but a first name. She woke to an empty bed and a silence where a name should have been. Weeks later, a positive pregnancy test would drag her into the fortified world of Chicago's most untouchable crime family and straight into the arms of the man who ruled it. Junie was 32. Voluptuous through the hips and shoulders she had long since stopped apologizing for, and she wore that body the way she wore everything else she had built, like it belonged to her, no votes accepted. A curvy woman in a boardroom either shrank herself to be tolerated or stood at full size and made people adjust. Junie stood at full size. She had built Meridian out of an idea, a maxed-out credit card, and the particular fury of watching investors look at her resume, then her body, and decide which one to believe. Now those same men called her office begging for meetings. 5 years of 18-hour days had cost her things she rarely counted. A relationship with a man named Derek who had taught her painfully what it felt like to be managed instead of loved, narrowed instead of chosen, until she left and swore no man would shrink her life again. She had rebuilt herself alone and told herself alone was enough. We post a brand new Mafia love story like this every single day, so subscribe now. That Thursday in November, she stood at the edge of a hotel ballroom in Black Valentino, watching Chicago's tech elites circle each other with champagne and calculated smiles, and told herself she'd stay 1 hour and leave before her heels started screaming. She had not planned on a man appearing at her elbow as though he'd been waiting specifically for her. "Junie Hart," said a voice beside her, smooth as aged whiskey. "I've been hoping to meet you." She turned and forgot briefly how to breathe. He was tall, easily 6'3", shoulders filling out a tuxedo the way only a man who used his body for more than a desk could manage, dark hair combed back from a face that looked carved. His eyes were storm gray and fixed on her with a focus so total it made her skin prickle, as if he'd already decided she was the only interesting thing in the room. "Have we met?" she asked, proud her voice held steady. "Not yet," he said, offering his hand. "Cassius. Just Cassius. No last name, no company, no context," which should have been a warning and landed like an invitation instead. His hand was warm and calloused in a way that didn't match the cut of his suit. "What brings you to a summit like this?" she asked, sipping champagne to cover the fact that she didn't want to let go of his hand. "Let's say I have a vested interest in security," he said, something flickering behind his eyes that made the words land heavier than small talk had any right to. "You're the founder of Meridian Cyber. I've been following your work." "Are you here with anyone?" she heard herself ask, bolder than she usually allowed. "No," he said, holding her gaze. "Are you?" "No." The word hung between them, thick with possibility. "Would you like to get out of here?" he asked, low enough that it belonged only to her. "I know a place. Quieter." Every rational part of her, the part that had built a company on calculated risk, screamed a warning. She did not know this man's last name, or why his hands were rough, or why he watched the exits like a habit. This was neither calculated nor careful. "Yes," she said anyway. He set her glass on a passing tray and offered his arm, and she let him lead her past the marble and every version of herself that would have said no. The November air raised gooseflesh on her bare arms, and he shrugged out of his jacket without being asked and settled it warm over her shoulders. A black car worth more than her first office lease waited at the curb. "Do you trust me?" he asked, holding the door. "For tonight," she said, and stepped inside. The drive carried them along the lakefront to a private elevator that opened on a penthouse that stole what breath she had left. floor-to-ceiling glass, a skyline like scattered stars, dark leather, a bar stocked like a five-star lounge. "This is yours?" she asked. "One of my properties," he said, already pouring. "Bourbon or wine? Bourbon. Neat." "So, Cassius, with no last name," she said, emboldened by the bourbon and the dark. "What do you actually do? Because I'm fairly certain it isn't tech." "Import, export," he said. "Family business. That's wonderfully vague." "Some things are better left vague," he said, moving close enough that she felt the heat off him. "Tonight I'd rather know about you." Founder. Forbes list. What does a woman like that do when she isn't building an empire? "Honestly," she said, "I don't remember. 5 years of 18-hour days, and I can't recall the last time I did something purely because I wanted it." "What do you want, Junie?" he asked, and it landed somewhere low and unguarded. "You," she said simply. "Tonight, I want you." She rose on her toes and kissed him before either of them could think better of it. And for one suspended heartbeat, he went still. And then his control broke entirely, hands framing her face, kissing her back with a hunger that matched her own. He walked her backward until the cool glass met her spine, found the zipper of her dress and eased it down slow like worship. And when it pooled at her feet, he pulled back, just far enough to look at all of her, with an intensity that should have made her want to cover herself. Instead, she felt powerful. "Beautiful," he breathed. "Every soft, generous inch of you is beautiful, Junie." "Say that again, and I might believe it," she whispered. And he said it again against her throat until she did. What followed was unlike anything in her carefully scheduled life, patient and demanding in equal measure, and when he finally claimed her, it felt less like a stranger's touch and more like recognition. Some part of her waiting her whole disciplined life for exactly this collision. Afterward, they lay tangled in his sheets, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing slow shapes on her bare shoulder. And she felt something she hadn't felt in years. "Peace. Stay," he murmured into her hair. "Stay tonight." She should have gathered her dress and her dignity. Instead, for once, she let herself simply exist inside the moment. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." She woke to sunlight and an empty bed. His tuxedo was gone from the floor. Her dress hung neatly over a chair, her shoes lined beside it, as though someone had tidied around her while she slept and then vanished. No note, no number. Nothing but the memory of storm-gray eyes and a mark on her throat. This was fine, she told herself, dressing with hands that would not quite stop shaking. No complications, no expectations. Except she'd wanted more, had already started imagining a last name, whether whatever this was could survive daylight. The doorman called her a car without comment, and she rode home through the Gold Coast in last night's gown, with 17 missed calls waiting, everyone about the company that was apparently still there. She threw herself into work with something close to violence, telling herself the night had been exactly what she needed and nothing more. But alone at night, she could still feel his mouth at her throat, still hear her own name in that low voice, and could not shake the sense she'd lost something she hadn't known she was looking for until it was gone. 3 weeks passed. Then 4. The memory should have faded. Instead, it sharpened, until she found herself touching the faded mark on her neck, wishing she had asked for more than a first name. It was morning sickness that finally forced her to look at the signs she'd been explaining away as stress. The exhaustion, the tenderness. The 6 weeks her period had quietly refused to arrive. She sat on her bathroom floor and watched the second line bloom pink, with a clarity that hit like a physical blow. Pregnant. By a stranger whose last name she didn't know, who had no way to be found. She pressed a hand to her still flat stomach, and beneath the fear, unexpected and stubborn, she felt something that scared her more. Hope. She booked her first appointment under her middle name at a clinic across town in Pilsen, far from anywhere she was known. Dr. Naomi Reyes was kind and unhurried and didn't ask questions when Junie paid cash. The ultrasound confirmed it. 8 weeks. A strong, steady heartbeat. "Do you have support?" the doctor asked gently, eyes flicking to Junie's bare ring finger. "The father isn't in the picture," Junie said, the words tasting like metal. "I've handled everything else myself." She hired a private investigator, a discreet man named Desmond Cole, recommended by her corporate counsel. She gave him a first name, a neighborhood she couldn't find twice, and a description that made his eyebrows climb. "This isn't much," Desmond warned. "Do your best," Junie said. "Money isn't the concern." 3 days later, Desmond called with urgency that made her stomach clench before he said a word. He met her at a coffee shop, not her office, a manila folder gripped white-knuckled in his hands, his face pale. "I found him," he said. "But Junie, you need to understand what I'm about to tell you." He slid a photograph across the table. Cassius stepping from a black car flanked by 2 men built like problems waiting to happen. Beneath it, a newspaper clipping turned her blood cold. "Cassius Renn," Desmond said quietly. "One of the men who effectively runs organized crime in this city. 4 generations of family business. The bureau's tried to build a case for a decade. Nothing sticks. Her mind refused the shape of it. Her Cassius, who had held her like something precious. A Mafia boss." "There's more," Desmond said, graver still. "He's engaged. Isabella Conti, daughter of Salvatore Conti, who controls the territory south of the river. A strategic alliance 2 years in the making. Weddings set for spring." The world tilted. That night had meant nothing to him because he already belonged to someone else. "My advice is to walk away and forget you ever met him," Desmond said. "Men like Cassius Renn are dangerous in ways you can't picture from here." She paid him double, made him swear to destroy every copy of his research, and went home and was violently sick. Pregnant with a Mafia boss's child, a Mafia boss engaged to another woman. She could tell no one. She was on her own, exactly as she'd always been. She threw herself into the company again, using board meetings to outrun the impossible math of her life. 2 weeks later, she noticed the black SUV that appeared whenever she left the office, the same man in the same coffee shop who looked away a beat too late. She had not built a company by ignoring her instincts, and her instincts were screaming that someone was watching her, and she had a terrible suspicion who. Confirmation came on a Thursday late, alone on the 20th floor. The knock at her door made her expect the night cleaner. It was Cassius, devastating in a charcoal suit, storm gray eyes fixed on her. But harder now. A tension coiled through his shoulders. "Hello, Junie," he said, closing the door with a click that sounded like a cell locking. "How did you get in here?" she demanded, hand dropping fast from her stomach. "Security can be persuaded," he said, crossing toward her. "We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. You made it clear that night was a one-time thing when you disappeared." "Is your fiancé part of the complication?" she said, unable to keep the bitterness down. "Does Isabella Conti know how you spend your free time?" Something flickered. Surprise, maybe, that she'd done her homework. "So you know what I am." "I know what you are," she said, circling behind her desk. "A criminal, a liar." "And yet you didn't run," he said, closer than the desk should have allowed. "You felt what I felt, Junie." "What I felt," she said, laughing. The sound scraped raw. "Was I an acquisition? Something to pass the time while your fiancé was out of town?" His hand closed around her wrist, not painfully but firm. "Don't reduce that night to something cheap." She freed her wrist. "One I'm not interested in repeating." "That isn't why I'm here," he said, and his eyes dropped deliberately to where her hand had rested a moment before. "My men have watched you for 3 weeks. A clinic in Pilsen under a name that isn't yours. Prenatal vitamins. A very sudden interest in my family. Her blood went to ice. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting you. There's a difference. From what? From being seen with me, he said, moving to the window. We were photographed leaving that gala together. My enemies look for exactly this kind of weakness. Then you should have thought of that before you took me home, she said. It doesn't matter now. I'm not your concern. He turned, and something in his face made her heart stutter. You're carrying my child, Junie. That makes you the entirety of my concern. The words hung between them. She could have denied it, but there was no point. He already knew. How long? She asked quietly. My men reported your visit 2 weeks ago. I've been waiting to see if you'd tell me yourself. Why would I? She said, anger flaring. You're engaged. You vanished. What was I supposed to do, announce it at your penthouse? Yes, he said with absolute conviction. That's exactly what you should have done. Then let me tell you who I am, he said, closing the last of the distance. And this time, she did not retreat. Cassius Renn, 36. Running my family's business since my father died. The engagement to Isabella is political, no love in it, no relationship beyond strategy. That doesn't make it better. I know, he said, something raw crossing his face, but that night with you was real. The first real thing I'd felt in years. And then I had to leave, because being seen with me puts a target on your back. My world isn't safe. I couldn't bear the thought of you paying for that. I can handle this on my own, she said. I don't doubt it, he said, a soft, surprising smile breaking through. You built an empire from nothing. But you shouldn't have to do this alone. That's my child, my responsibility. Let me be part of this. Please. Something in her cracked at the word please, this dangerous, powerful man asking instead of demanding. What about Isabella, she asked. I'll handle it, he said, steel returning. But understand what accepting my protection means. Guards, security, restrictions. I won't risk you or our child. I need time, she said finally. He nodded, hands still at her face. You have until tomorrow. The men watching you are mine, for your protection. Don't try to lose them. Promise me. Please, he said again, and it undid her a second time. Fine, she whispered. I promise. He kissed her forehead, achingly gentle, and left her with more questions than answers. By morning, she'd made a list, pros and cons, like she was evaluating a term sheet instead of her life. The cons ran longer. The pros carried a weight no spreadsheet could capture. Her phone rang at exactly 8. There's a car outside, Cassius said. We should talk somewhere private. I have a 10 o'clock with investors. Reschedule it. This is more important. Fine, she said. Give me 30 minutes. If that reveal knocked the wind out of you, subscribe and stick around for what happens next. The penthouse looked different in daylight. Family photographs on a shelf, a worn leather chair. He made her coffee, 1 cup, and gave her room instead of crowding it. What do you want to know? He asked. Everything, she said. If you want to be part of this child's life, I need to understand exactly what that means. He told her. 4 generations in Chicago, a great-grandfather who'd arrived from Sicily with nothing and built an empire, providing what the law would not. His father who expanded it, his own inheritance of all of it. You're describing organized crime, she said flatly, the Mafia. I'm describing a business that operates outside the law, he said. Some of it's illegal. I won't pretend otherwise, but I employ thousands, and I protect neighborhoods the police have written off. You're justifying it. I'm explaining it, he said. I promise you this. You and our child will never be touched by the violence. You'll be shielded, kept separate from anything dangerous. How can you promise that? You just told me being seen with you makes me a target. It does, he said, hardening, which is why you need security. The moment my enemies know about this baby, you become leverage. Leverage. The word turned her blood cold. Who? She asked, hand protective over her stomach. There's one in particular, he said, pacing to the window. Dario Voss runs the docks, weapons and product through the port, pushing into my territory for months. If he learned about you, he didn't finish. He didn't need to. This is insane, she said, standing. You're asking me to raise a child in a world where he could be used as a weapon against you? No, he said, crossing to her. I'm asking you to trust me to keep you both safe. I have resources you can't imagine. You'd be untouchable, as long as you're careful. I'm not trying to control you, he said, hands at her shoulders. I'm trying to protect you. There's a difference. Is there? She challenged. From where I'm standing, it looks the same. He went quiet, jaw working. You're right, he said, finally stepping back. I can't force you. But consider the alternative. You alone carrying a child dangerous people could use against me. That night wasn't only physical for me, Junie, he said, softer now. You made me feel human again. Pretty words, she said, though her voice wavered. True words, he said, his hand at her cheek. That child is mine, my blood. I won't walk away. And Isabella, she said, the name bitter. Will be handled, he said, steel returning. It was my father's arrangement. A contract, nothing more. Does she know that? His hesitation was answer enough. You need to end it, Junie said, before we discuss anything else. I won't be the other woman. Give me 1 week, he said, thumb tracing her jaw, to handle Isabella. Then I'm yours completely. His phone buzzed before she could answer. Voss, he said, reading it, expression darkening. He's made a move on one of my warehouses. I need to handle this. Go, she said, suddenly exhausted. He kissed her forehead again on his way out. My driver will take you anywhere. Bruno will stay with you as security. I don't need, she started. Please, he said, and that word undid her completely. She nodded, too tired to argue. This was her life now, apparently. Security protocols, a Mafia boss claiming her and their unborn child as his. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt relief that she was no longer carrying it alone. The week that followed felt surreal. Bruno became her shadow, unobtrusive despite being built like a wall. Cassius called every evening at 7, asking about her day with a genuine interest that caught her off guard every time. I'm ending it with Isabella tomorrow, he told her on day 5. Her father is arranging the meeting. It won't be pleasant. Will there be consequences, she asked, curled on her sofa with tea. Yes, he said, without softening it. It'll cost me. Worth it for the baby. A silence then quieter for you, Junie, for both of you. The words settled warm and terrifying in her chest. On day 6, everything changed. She had stayed late against Bruno's advice, a crisis with her lead engineer she couldn't leave unresolved. Bruno was bringing the car around when 3 men stepped from the shadows, blocking her path. Junie Hart, said the one in front, thin, with eyes like a snake's. We need to talk. I don't know you, she said, stepping back. But we know you, he said, smiling with too many teeth. Dario Voss sends his regards. He's very interested in your relationship with Cassius Renn. His gaze dropped meaningfully to her stomach. Pregnant with the heir to the Renn Empire. Quite the accomplishment for a tech CEO. Bruno materialized between them before she could answer, hand already inside his jacket, 2 more men appearing as backup she hadn't known was there. The lady has nothing to say to you, Bruno said, granite in his voice. Walk away. We're just talking, the thin man said, hands raised. Mr. Voss wanted her to know he's available if she ever needs alternative protection. Mr. Renn's enemies have a way of meeting unfortunate ends. The threat needed no translation. Now, Bruno growled, and they retreated, tossing a business card at her feet on the way out. She left it where it fell. Cassius was waiting outside her building, flanked by 4 men she didn't recognize, his face thunderous until he saw her, and then almost gentle. He pulled her into his arms before she could speak. Are you hurt? He demanded. No, she said. But they knew about the baby, Cassius. How? Someone at the clinic, Bruno said. A nurse with gambling debts. Voss likely paid her for anything on your file. Junie felt violated in a way that had nothing to do with the men on the street. "This is why you need to let me protect you properly," Cassius said, hands tight on her shoulders. "No more working late alone." "I can't live like that." "You can and you will, because the alternative is Voss using you and our child to destroy me. Is that what you want?" "Of course not," she said, tears pricking. "But I have a company to run." "Then run it from somewhere secure," he said. "I have an estate north of the city, fully secured, isolated. You want to lock me away? I want to keep you alive," he said, and his control cracked. "Voss doesn't make idle threats. If he's targeting you, it's because he sees you as my weakness. And he's right, you are." "I ended it with Isabella today," he said, voice rougher. "It cost me 3 warehouses and Salvatore's fury. Besides, everything is falling apart, and the only thing I care about is keeping you safe." She stood and moved to him. "Cassius, I love you," she said, the words tumbling out. "I've loved you since that first night, since you looked at me and saw a woman instead of a headline. I love you, and I will burn this city down before I let anyone touch you." "You can't love me," he said. "We barely know each other." "I know you're strong and brilliant and stubborn as hell," he said, hands framing her face. "I know that when I'm with you, I feel like a man instead of a weapon. And I know that if anything happened to you, it would destroy me." "This is insane," she whispered. "Yes," he said, forehead pressed to hers. "But it's true." "What if I can't live in your world?" she asked. "Then we build a new one," he said. "I need you to promise me something," she said, meeting his eyes steadily. "I'm not running and I'm not hiding. If we do this, you eliminate the threat completely." Something dark and satisfied moved across his face. "Done," he said. "And promise me you won't try to control me. Security, fine, but I still make my own decisions about my company, my life, our child." "You're my equal," he said, fierce now. "My partner. I'll protect you, but I won't cage you." "Then yes," she said, "to the estate, to security, to building something together. But if you ever lie to me, if you ever make me feel trapped, the way a man once did, I'm gone. Baby or no baby. I'm not him," he said, "absolute. I'll never be him." "Prove it," she said. And he kissed her, fierce and possessive. And when they broke apart, he whispered against her mouth, "Move in with me tonight." And she said yes, and sealed both their fates. The Lake Forest estate was nothing like the sleek downtown penthouse. 20 acres behind walls that looked decorative and were, in fact, reinforced steel, guards on rotation, cameras on every angle. Cassius gave her the tour himself, a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, a sunroom overlooking gardens that would bloom come spring, and upstairs, a nursery already taking shape in soft sage green. "You were very confident I'd say yes," she observed. "Hopeful," he corrected, pulling her back against his chest, hands settling over her stomach. "But I'd have finished it either way. This is my child's room, whether you were here or not." The possessiveness should have unsettled her. Instead, it made her feel cherished. "This isn't only about protection," he said, producing a small velvet box, a ring inside it that stole what breath she had left, an emerald-cut stone flanked by smaller diamonds in platinum. "I'm not asking you to marry me," he said quickly. "Not yet. I'm asking you to wear this, so my world knows hurting you means war with me." "I don't belong to anyone," she said. "Poor choice of words," he said, sliding it onto her finger. "A perfect fit. You're mine in the way that matters, and I'm yours." "Yes," she whispered, and he kissed her deep and possessive, and something in her finally fully believed it. The weeks fell into rhythm. She worked remotely, and Cassius left for the city each morning, hands going to her stomach before hello each evening. At 16 weeks, Dr. Reyes came to the estate and they watched together on the screen as their child moved, tiny hands and feet already formed. "A boy," the doctor said. "A healthy baby boy." Cassius's hand tightened on hers, tears standing in his eyes. A son, he breathed. We're having a son. I want to name him for my father, he said that night, hands spread over her stomach. Julian. Only if you agree. Julian, she tested. It's strong. I like it. Junie Hart Renn, he said. I want him to carry your name too, to know he comes from strength on both sides. The gesture meant more to her than the ring had, but the peace couldn't hold. 3 weeks in, Cassius came home with his jaw locked. Voss hit one of my legitimate businesses, he said. Julian's, the restaurant, named for my father. 3 of my people are in the hospital. Then end this, she said. You told me you'd protect us, so do it. Something shifted in his expression. Pride that she was fighting instead of cowering. There's a sit-down tomorrow, he said. Every family, neutral ground. Voss will be there. If I move against him publicly with witnesses, the message can't be misread. Then do it, she said. There will be consequences, he warned. Blood. Possibly war. Nothing worth having ever is clean, she said, palm flat over his heart. Our son deserves better than growing up afraid. Tomorrow night, he promised. I'll handle it. But the universe had other plans. She woke at 3 a.m. to breaking glass. Cassius was out of bed and moving before she'd surfaced, a gun appearing from somewhere she'd never seen him keep one. Stay here, he ordered. Lock it behind me. She locked the door and pressed her back to it, phone gripped tight. And then came the gunshots, 3 quick cracks and a silence worse than the noise, her hand flat over her stomach. Their son. This was Cassius's world at 3 a.m, and she had asked for exactly this. When the door finally opened, it was Cassius, unharmed, blood on his shirt that wasn't his own. Voss sent a message, he said. Cold fury banked behind his eyes. 3 men tried the south entrance. They're dealt with. The euphemism turned her stomach, but she pulled back to look at him. This proves my point, she said. Tomorrow you end this. Permanently. I love you, Cassius Renn, she said, palm on his cheek. All of you, including the parts that are dangerous. But I need you to be those parts now. For us. I love you too, he whispered, face buried in her hair. You and our son are my entire world now. Then protect it, she said. The next evening he dressed in black, tailored like death, and kissed her at the door, hands lingering on her stomach. If I'm not back by midnight, he said, Bruno has instructions to get you somewhere safe. You'll be back, she said. I refuse to consider anything else. She waited through hours that crawled. At nearly midnight, she heard the car. Cassius walked in exhausted and victorious, a split in his lip, knuckles bruised and smiling in spite of it. It's done, he said simply. Voss won't be a problem, ever again. She didn't ask for details. She went to him, wrapped her arms around him and held on. We're safe, she whispered. He tightened his arms around her. She pulled back to look at him. Then marry me, she said. He blinked. What? Marry me, she repeated. Not because of the baby, not because it's strategic. Marry me because I love you, and I want this life with you officially, completely. His smile broke wide and bright. Yes, God, yes, Junie, tomorrow if you want. Let's wait until after Julian is born, she said, laughing, laying his hand over her stomach. I want to fit into a proper dress. He laughed and kissed her. And for the first time since this impossible journey began, she felt entirely at peace. The months that followed passed in a blur of wedding planning and what Cassius called strategic consolidation. Absorbing the territory Voss left behind with an efficiency that no longer frightened her, because now he asked her first, always. What do you think, he'd say, sliding a proposed shipping partnership across the table, and she'd study it with the same eye she brought to her own boardroom, hunting for the weakness nobody else had thought to check for. Together they were, as he liked to say, unstoppable. Meridian's security systems went into his legitimate restaurants and shipping lines, making them nearly impenetrable, and his connections opened doors for her company that no venture round ever could. They married in a private ceremony at the estate when she was 8 months along, in a custom cream silk gown that made room for all of her, and Cassius wept openly when she came down the garden aisle. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," he told her. "I, Junie Hart, take you, Cassius Renn, to be my husband," she said, voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overtake it. "And I promise to stand beside you as your equal, to challenge you when you're wrong, and to build an empire with you that our son will be proud to inherit." Cassius's vows were just as unconventional. "I promise to protect you fiercely, love you completely, and defer to your brilliance in every argument involving a computer," he said, and the small gathered crowd laughed through their tears. When he kissed her, sealing it, their son kicked hard, as if in approval. 3 weeks later, at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, her water broke, and Cassius went from asleep to fully alert in seconds. Had her in the car within 10 minutes, fear barely hidden behind his calm. Labor ran 14 brutal hours, and he stayed through every one of them, murmuring encouragement in English and Italian until Julian arrived crying and furious and perfect, and Cassius wept holding him, promising his son he would never know fear, that he was the prince of 2 empires now. Watching this dangerous man who had killed to protect his family be endlessly gentle with their son was its own kind of revelation. He changed diapers. He handled midnight feedings, rocking Julian to sleep, murmuring in Italian for hours. "You're a natural," she told him one night. "I'm motivated," he said, looking up with a softness she hadn't imagined the first night she met him. "This is everything I never knew I wanted, Junie. You, him, this whole life. I'd burn the world to keep it." 6 weeks later, it nearly came to that. A rival organization allied with what was left of Voss's people, the Pharaoh family, made a move on one of Cassius's shipping operations, testing whether fatherhood had made him soft. "They need reminding who they're dealing with," Cassius said, already reaching for his phone. "Wait," Junie said, Julian at her breast. "Before you go in with guns, let me try something." His eyebrow rose. "What did you have in mind?" "The Pharaohs run their operation through a logistics company," she said. "Let my team look for vulnerabilities. If we find a way in, we end this without a single shot." His smile turned slow and delighted. "I love how your mind works." Meridian's team worked through the night, and by morning had access to every shipping manifest, every financial record, every private communication the Pharaohs had. "We could destroy them," she told him, laying it all out. Leak the fraud, expose the smuggling, crash their network entirely. "Or," she said, "we make them an offer. They back off, apologize, and we keep the access as insurance. If they move again, we pull the trigger." He pulled her carefully into his arms, mindful of the baby against her shoulder. "You're brilliant," he said. "This is better than violence. It's control." The Pharaohs accepted within hours, and word moved fast through Cassius's world that the new Mrs. Renn was not simply the boss's wife. She was a power in her own right, one who had ended a war with a keyboard instead of a gun. And nobody who heard the story ever underestimated her curves or her competence again. Board meetings turned into family afternoons, Julian on a blanket nearby, Cassius working beside her, consulting each other on everything, until Chicago simply came to know them as one name. At Julian's first birthday, tech executives mingled with old family men who'd known Cassius's father, an unlikely combination that somehow worked exactly the way she and Cassius worked. "What are you thinking?" Cassius asked, finding her watching from the edge of it all. "That a year ago, I was alone and terrified. Running from a man I thought I could never trust, she said honestly. And now I'm here with you, with our son, with everything we built. Any regrets? He asked, careful. Not one, she said, stepping into his arms, their family whole around her. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be, where we both are. He kissed her, tender and possessive at once. I love you, Mrs. Renn, he said. Thank you for walking into that gala. Thank you for being brave enough to let me in. I love you too, she whispered. My dangerous, complicated, perfect husband. As the sun set gold over the estate and Julian laughed at something his godfather Bruno was doing, Junie understood something she had never let herself believe during all those solitary years building an empire alone. Independence had felt like strength, but this partnership, trust, two people building something larger than either could alone, was stronger still. Cassius Renn had claimed her that first reckless night in a downtown penthouse, and in the end, she had claimed him right back. Subscribe now because a brand new story just like theirs is waiting for you tomorrow.